And we've conditioned praise, and we've conditioned books, and we've conditioned math and reading and writing. Not all of those things are published. All of them are in dissertations somewhere. But we know that this can extend beyond a physical, tangible stimulus. This extends to really important kinds of reinforcers in educational settings.
I was a teacher at the time when we conditioned praise as a reinforcer by observation. And it was one of those studies that there's no way this is going to work. And when it worked, other people would come in my classroom and be like, oh, they're totally different kids now, because now praise functioned as a reinforcer as a function of this procedure that we did.
With the peer, it was consistent with the previous research. It was successfully established or increased the reinforcing value of the neutral stimuli. But with adult, it showed no effect or very limited effect. And you can almost see the trend from our first post-intervention data under the B condition, which is the neutral stimuli after adult confederate. There's some initial responses and then went to extinction.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cooperant Learning. I'm your host, Kyle Sturry. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Steve Sparks. Hi, Steve. What's going on,
How's it going? I was just going to say, we were just talking about your Amish roots here, and I was going to mention how handy you are with your thumb injury here. I don't know how you're going to hook up the horse and buggy to make it out to ABAI next week, but because of that, he had me ship out almost 500 pounds of swag for everybody. So please come to our table and get all kinds of free stuff so we don't have to worry about figuring out how to get that home.
I know this injury will be an excuse for me not to have to carry any of the boxes or anything. That'll just all be on you while we're out there. But thank you for your considerate question. It is healing up nicely and it doesn't hurt as bad anymore. Thank you for that. I know that's
it looks great. It looks great.
It doesn't actually, but we'll spare the details on that incident. So, but yeah, we will be at ABAI. We're excited to be out there. Meeting people. A lot of our guests that have been on the show, we've never met in person. So I'm excited about that too. Touching base, we got some speakers that are going to be out there. So just hopefully a fun time. I've never been to San Francisco before. So
I have not been since I was 7, so I don't remember it too well.
Well, you'll be my tour guide then.
Sounds good.
You know where all the parks are.
My uncle was a prison guard out there, so I'll just take you to the prison. That's all I know.
Perfect. Yeah, that'll be really fun. Hey, let's introduce our guests. We have a full house today. I'm really, really excited about it. They're the authors on the paper, The Effects of Peers versus Adults on Observational Conditioning by Denial. It's in Behavioral Interventions, April 2026. I'll do some introductions here. Our first guest is the president of the Foundation for the Advancement of a Strategic Science of Teaching and serves as the chair of the CABAS Professional and Organizational Standards Committee under FAST. She also serves as a senior behavior analyst consultant to schools implementing the CABAS model. Her research interests include component analyses of successful behavior analytic models of education, teacher and supervisor training, verbally governed and verbally governing behaviors, establishment of early observing responses, verbal behavior development, conditioned reinforcement, and observational learning. Dr. Jessica Singer-Dudek, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'll introduce your partners in crime here. Joining her, he received his MA of Philosophy and PhD in Applied Behavior Analysis from Teachers College and Columbia University. He's a program supervisor at the Fred S. Keller School located in the suburbs of New York City. He has worked for the Fred S. Keller School, a CABAS model school, since 2016. He's supervising preschool classrooms for children with and without disabilities. His research interests have focused on establishing verbal developmental cusps and capabilities, conditioned reinforcement, and observational learning. Hung Chang, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And last but not least, our third guest received her BS in education from the State University of New York at Geneseo. Then she earned her MA in philosophy and PhD in applied behavior analysis from Teachers College, Columbia University. She's worked at the Fred S. Keller School since 2008, serving as a classroom supervisor for both preschool and early intervention classrooms. In 2024, she became the director of the Fred S. Keller School White Plains campus. Her research interests have focused on verbal behavior development, ranging from foundational behavioral cusps, related to observing responses to incidental language acquisition and observational learning. Jennifer Longano, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. And
I think this is unfair that they get such great introductions and you never mentioned my chili cook-off win this past year and where that came. So
it does
not
parallel. It does parallel their accomplishments for sure. Well, I really want to talk about a bunch of things. The paper that aforementioned paper, obviously, in observational learning, but just reviewing this line of work and this powerful tool, kind of rooted in behavior analysis. Before we define observational learning and the observational contingencies by denial, what kind of led to your interest in this subject in observational learning arrangements in education? And whoever wants
that
to go.
That is a question for Jessica Dudek.
I'll start, I guess.
She's our pioneer in this.
I've been kind of interested in this line of research. I've been involved in this line of research for about 20 years. So I think, like most research, it was a little serendipitous. I was actually, and I think this is true of a lot of behavioral research in particular. It's inductive, right? So you're trying to solve a problem. You're trying to teach a child something they're not learning, trying to figure it out. You vary your methods, you figure out different things to do, and all of a sudden you're successful and you're like, wait, what just happened? I don't know why that worked. Can I get it to work again? And so that exact thing was happening. I was trying to condition tokens for a kid. And it was actually a classroom of kids. There were about 12 kids in the class and everybody was on a token system. And at the end of the day, the teacher would, everybody would count up their tokens and they would trade them in. And it was this whole process. And there were kids who had accrued a bunch of tokens, but they were running around the room when it was trade-in time, and they really didn't seem to have any interest in trading them in. And so to me, that meant they weren't really truly conditioned reinforcers. They were going through the motions of receiving tokens, but they didn't mean anything.
Sure.
And so I in conversation, I was like, I don't understand. They are observing their peers all day, right? They're exposed to watching other kids trade in their tokens, but for them, they just were not part of that process. They weren't observing the necessary contingencies. And so that kind of led in conversation with Dr. Greer, who is sort of the father of all of our research.
Yeah.
He said, oh, well, you got to do the I don't remember what he called it, the conditioning procedure. And I think it was called the peer competitive or something procedure. And I was like, wait, what's that? So I wasn't even aware of this. And there had been prior studies, nothing published, I don't think officially in the literature, but a couple of dissertations and just some procedures from the past. Actually, that's not true. There was a published procedure from the early 90s on inducing swallowing, getting kids to consume food by mouth. But it was related, but not quite. And anyway, it just started this journey of, okay, we're going to do this procedure. And went in that classroom, took those kids who didn't care, set up certain conditions for them where we contrived a situation basically. So they were put in a situation where it was very clear their peers were receiving things that they were not. And it worked. And of course, when things work, you're like, wait, I don't get it. How'd that happen? And I mean, to skip to maybe another one of your questions, like we've replicated this procedure. I've lost count. And we've replicated it across lots of different kinds of kids in lots of different settings. We've conditioned multiple kinds of stimuli. We've conditioned things that are absolutely, for the pure sake of basic science, like metal washers and paper clips and things that are not, really reinforcers for young children. And we've conditioned praise, and we've conditioned books, and we've conditioned math and reading and writing. Not all of those things are published. All of them are in dissertation somewhere. But we know that this can extend beyond a physical, tangible stimulus. This extends to really important kinds of reinforcers in educational settings. And so that's where it started. What's the next question?
Well, I can go to your partners there too. How did I guess Jennifer, we'll go with you first. How did you get connected with Fred S. Keller School and start applying this observational learning tools?
Yeah. So actually, Jessica, as you were talking, I was thinking back, so we're all connected through Teachers College, Columbia University, and we worked in part of our internship. When you're a master's student, you have to work in a Cavas school. So I was in a Cavas classroom, not at Fred S. Keller School when I was doing my master's, which was, I don't even want to say what year, but it was a very long time ago. And my master's thesis, actually, that's where I met Jessica. I got to collect data on one of the first studies that was published for the observational by denial. And I was thinking back to the participants that we had who would be like, I want that, where we were trying to condition tokens and things like that. So like I said, that was more than 20 years ago. And we've continually looked at different aspects of it. And I've kind of been in and out of this research study. We did the praise together. We've done some other studies together, but it's always a fun research topic to come back to because it is such a phenomenon that when the kids, it's so obvious that when it happens, it's happening. You can walk into one of our integrated classrooms and hand out anything and the kids will be like, I didn't get one, and that's where that phenomenon of we can condition things through observation has really come from. As far as getting involved with the Keller School, from that Cavas classroom, once I graduated with my PhD, an opportunity came up to work at the Fred S. Keller School, which is a Cavas school. And I took it because I love it. And I really enjoyed my experience with Cavas, and I keep learning new things. And the ability to teach kids, but also to continue to do research is a really nice part of the job that we get to do both of those things.
Sure.
And get to learn, better ways to teach our students. And I think all of our research has come out of that, of how can we best meet the needs of our kids? And you stumble on some things that are just really exciting to study. When we did the praise one, I was a teacher at the time when we conditioned praise as a reinforcer by observation. And it was one of those studies that there's no way this is going to work. And when it worked, other people would come in my classroom and be like, oh, they're totally different kids now, because now praise functioned as a reinforcer as a function of this procedure that we did. So
Cool.
It's been a really cool, interesting experience. I don't know if I answered your question. I hope I did. I talked a lot.
Yeah. No. Yeah, absolutely. I love getting kind of those background stories for sure.
Yeah.
So Hung, same question to you.
My history is a little shorter compared to Jen's. I came here around 2016.
Because I'm a lot older than you.
Well, you look just fine, Jen. And Jen was my supervisor at the time when I started in the master program, and I happened to be in one of the integrated classrooms. That's where I did my internship, and later I became the classroom teacher. And I had to manage a lot of students at the same time because it's an integrated setting, so go up to 14, 15 students at a time. And observational learning is one of the crucial components or prerequisites for them to be in that kind of classroom setting. And then I come across this study from Jen, actually, introduced this concept to me. And that's also how I bonded with Jessica after, because we're both very much into observational learning research. And that's how I started. And I survived the PhD and master program. And I had the opportunity to stay like Jen, and I loved it so much. So I decided to stay as a program supervisor after. Awesome. So this is actually a study that started in 2013, Jen. 10 years of making, 10 plus.
In reading about this procedure, in reading about observational conditioning, it's a concept that I was fairly unfamiliar with. But before you define it for me, I have kind of an applied example that may apply. You tell me if I'm right or wrong. I have young children. when they have friends over, and let's say the blocks are sitting on the side of the living room, nobody's playing with the blocks. Suddenly one of the little 6-year-olds might say, "Oh, blocks," and they'll go over, grab the blocks, and suddenly every kid is like, "Give me those blocks. I need those now." And there was like no impetus to, no MO for the blocks, other than now one of their peers is playing with the blocks, and that's a reinforcer already. So I know that's not apples to apples. Am I far off? I feel like when I was watching this, like, oh, this kind of describes my kid a little bit.
It's exactly the example that I give.
Oh wow.
Because
Okay.
I can remember being a child, and my younger sister, we had a whole playroom, right? And the toys sat on the shelves. And if I took something off the shelf, she would immediately run over and say, "No, that's mine. I was going to play with that." And nobody had touched it. So
Yeah.
I think that's exactly it. So we have to translate that into behavioral terms, right?
Yeah.
So we've been doing, so we have the area of observational learning, and then we have this thing about conditioned reinforcers by observation. And of course they're one and the same, but we can learn new operants. We can actually learn new respondents from observation. And this is specific to learning new reinforcers. And I think the importance here is they're not momentary. It's not a motivating operation that's temporary. We have conditioned stimuli that are maintained as reinforcers much longer. Some of that is anecdotal. We don't have the empirical evidence. We've only been able to test maybe 6 weeks out for maintenance, but I think if you expand it beyond the stimulus itself, it's not about the thing that was conditioned. It's about how new reinforcers can be learned. And so if we've shown you can condition paper clips, well, guess what else could potentially, this child can now potentially learn a whole host of reinforcers that are hopefully socially, educationally significant for the rest of their lives. And I think that's what you see. You see, it's the whole phenomenon of we want what we can't have. We don't know that we want it until we see somebody else who has it. And then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute. And so for us, I think that's the thing that we're calling denial. Right. And I know denial as a term, it has psychological meaning. It's completely different from what we're talking about here. It's that denied access. It's, well, you can't have this right now, but I want this right now, right? It's the idea of withholding something or restricting something. But the effects are not temporary. And that's what's really exciting and unusual, I think, for us. So,
and maybe that's a good time to get into kind of like, what are the major components of an OCDI intervention? What does that look like when implemented?
Hung, do you want to talk about that, or?
Sure. So usually we will select a performance task, and when we're talking about performance, that means something they already master, so that they can do it maybe fluently, and we don't have to establish a new behavior for them. So then we will have a confederate, we call it peer confederate or adult confederate in this paper, sit side by side next to the participant, and then they will be asked to perform a same task. And then, but only the confederate, after each response, only the confederate will have access to whatever we predetermined. So in this case, in this paper, it's paperclip, but like Jessica said, some of the study focused on conditioned books, so they were going to get a book, for example. And then after 10 trials for the intervention, at the same time, we are recording different responses from the participant, and to kind of make sure they are going through that denial process, that we're making sure, this thing is established. And then after a couple intervention sessions, there will be exit criterion we use, and we will conduct another round of post-assessment to determine whether the reinforcing value of the target stimuli changes after that. So that's kind of in a nutshell, that's how we do the procedure.
During that performance test, so they're usually sitting side by side, where they always are sitting side by side. And we've done it where they can see what the other participant is doing, and when they can't see what the other participant's doing, but they literally are given the same exact task. Sometimes it's like a match picture to picture, or sometimes it's, color picture, write a letter. It could be anything that we know that they already can do, but we're giving them the same antecedent, same instruction. They're emitting the same response, and they're just watching the peer confederate receive the item. So when they can see, like, I did the same thing as them, but I'm not getting it, and we've had it where there's like a partition where they can see, but they just know that somebody else is getting the reinforcer, and they're just sitting there like, I did it, I matched the picture. So that's part of the denial piece too.
Yeah. So they're literally watching somebody get these paper clips or washers or whatever the arbitrary stimulus might be, but they're not. So that's the denial piece of it. And then with that post, kind of that post assessment, is that when they start receiving the potentially conditioned reinforcers to establish whether or not they're now functioning as reinforcers? Is that what that?
Yeah. So maybe I'm gonna back up to what you said. Yeah. The most important thing in the tests of the function of the stimulus as reinforcers is that performance task, whatever it is that we choose, the kids know how to do it, but the task itself is not a reinforcer. So they don't like it. They can do it, but they don't necessarily choose to do it, right? So we've done things like putting beads on a string because it's a little bit difficult. It takes a little bit of effort. So yes, they can do it. Would they choose to put beads on a string as a reinforcer? No. So most importantly, and that can take a while. It can take us a while to find a task that the kid can do, but will only do for prosthetic reinforcement. And so most importantly, then we have to have these phases where we can demonstrate they'll work for candy, they won't work for paper clips, right? And so that's what those very lengthy graphs until we get steady state, right? We need to show performance under conditions of a known reinforcer compared to conditions with a neutral stimulus. And then we do the intervention in between, and then we go back to conditions under the A, the known reinforcer, and B, and the B now looks, the same as the A, or sometimes they work even faster, or the rate of responding is even greater under the new reinforcer compared to the other. So we're really demonstrating the effects of the stimulus as a reinforcer before and after.
Gotcha.
Hung, don't you have like video of your kids in your class, like after you did books, like everybody looking at books post the conditioning? Like, didn't you have a video from your integrated class, like after you condition books?
Yeah,
like
I have
all
a
the
cuter
kids were
one.
running to the book corner to look at books.
Yes, I have cuter one. That's like one of the example. I saw kids that kind of curse a little bit during the intervention session when they're not getting it. That's also an indicator that we did not measure. But yeah, they will have a lot of responses, and then that also kind of sparked why we're adding different measurement. Like in the most recent one, if you look at the previous 2008 paper, probably some of the responses were not considered, were recorded. But just based on years of experience we're doing it, we are trying to capture other responses as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a cool way to condition reading as a reinforcer. That's really cool. Steve, go ahead.
Yeah. Is there it seems like there's got to be a fairly complex learning history to establish other people's reinforcers as a reinforcer as well. It's like a generalization of like, okay, every time someone else seems to react positively to an item that they've been delivered and then I've gotten it has also been reinforcing, and therefore, no, I'm learning that other people's reinforcers may be reinforcers to me as well. Have you seen any prerequisite for either language or social interaction, that sort of thing that is necessary for this to be effective? Or is it kind of across the board, this is just kind of work for most students?
No, I think that's an excellent question. I hope you guys don't mind that I'm going to answer it. We have one study where we actually systematically measured different kinds of prerequisite observing responses. And what we found is, and this was across 20-something kids, kids had to have what we call observing responses, or they had to attend to their peers. And we did this in a variety of ways. We had kids just walk by, and did the child look up, or another child come into the space where the participant was playing, and did they attend? Did they look? So it's an orienting response. The kids who didn't notice their peers, this isn't going to work for them. This is not going to establish the noticing, and then, also condition reinforcers. So absolutely, there are some social aspects to that. Well, it really is all social, but they have to have that awareness of the fact that there are kids around. And in terms of language, that's an empirical question we haven't quite answered. We did start to measure things like just looking during the intervention, because we had kids, it's very clear when the intervention is working, the kid's like, hey, what about me? I want that. Give me that, right?
Yeah.
Hung said we've had kids curse, we've had kids throw chairs, we've had kids, they're very visibly and obviously affected. But we've had kids, with very few mans who don't really readily emit vocal behavior. But we can measure things like grabbing. They grab the stimulus. We measure crying. And we've even begun to measure like just the looking, the orienting, because you can see when you do this, it's very clear when the participant begins to notice what's going on with the peer.
Yeah, I can definitely see those other behaviors that you could use to measure it with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old at home. It is a Royal Rumble every night when someone grabs a toy that the other wants. But yeah, it would seem like verbal behavior may or may not be necessary depending on the individual, because a lot of those skills of the interconnectedness and seeing what someone else is attending to would come a lot, like maybe before a lot of languages develop. I was thinking more in terms of that stereotypical autism setting where you have someone who has no interest in what those around them are doing, and that sort of thing. And that seemed like it would be hard to have some of that observational learning if, I don't really care what they have. So what's the point? So
You're right.
Well, let's break into this study a little bit. This asked a specific question about the OCDI arrangement. Do you want to talk about what this particular study evaluated in terms of, what questions you had?
So it's kind of in the title, and we want to see if when we're using or switching the confederate with the adult instead of using a peer, would that generate the same effect? Because the previous study tested no peer versus peer present, and obviously no peer, it didn't do anything. When you deliver to an empty bucket next to you, that's not going to condition. But with the peer receiving it, that's one of the crucial components. So we want to see, will adult generate the same effect, essentially. So we replicate the, Jessica also 2013 study with the peer and no peer. And then we replicate that sequence, but then instead of no peer, we have adult confederate, and we use both familiar and unfamiliar adults across participants to kind of roll out reinforcement history as well. And then the finding, it's pretty interesting, but that's probably a later question. I can wait a little bit for that.
Well, yeah, maybe I like to kind of visualize what these like sessions might have looked like. So like how long they were, who were the participants? These were younger participants, right?
Yeah, these are all preschoolers. So between age like 4 to 5.
Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. And then there's the phase in which there's no person sitting next to them, just empty bucket receiving some sort of neutral stimulus. There's a condition in which a peer confederate, which really cool that you're able to find peers that were willing to play ball. Is that often difficult to say like, hey, these aren't going to be that cool, but let's pretend like they're cool, or how do you set that
up? They
up?
usually got a little, at first they were confused because sometimes they don't necessarily understand, but they will perform the task like we asked them to do. But once they're getting the neutral stimuli or whatever the target stimuli we're trying to provide, they at first was confused. They're like, why are you giving me this? And then we did give them a brief period of time at the end of each session to interact with the neutral stimuli. And then at first they kind of look at it and look at us like, are you crazy? Like what am I doing with what I'm supposed to do with this?
Yeah.
But once they actually see the participant kind of cry, not necessarily crying, like wanted that item, but did not access, and they feel like they're getting some sort of privilege of playing with it, and then they will get their response changes. So then some of them actually will get excited after each trial, and then they'll actually interact with the neutral stimuli at the end of each session. And that's the benefit of being in the integrated setting. We do have neurotypical children in the class that we can explain to them, like you're going to help us like do this task and you're going to earn something special at the end of each task, for example. And that's how we communicate with them.
Very cool. So yeah, I'm sure everyone's dying to know, how did the results stack up? Did you find similar findings that you had in the past when a peer confederate was there? And then how did that stack up against adult confederates receiving the conditioned reinforcers?
Yeah, with the peer, it was consistent with the previous research. It was successfully established or increased the reinforcing value of the neutral stimuli. But with adult, it showed no effect or very limited effect. And you can almost see the trend from our first post-intervention data under the B condition, which is the neutral stimuli after adult confederate. There's some initial responses and then went to extinction. So then they wanted it initially and then stopped wanting it, and then just went straight to zero. But peer is kind of remained consistently high after the peer condition. And it did make some comment during the adult confederate condition that we can talk about later during the discussion. But that was an interesting observation that we did.
Yeah, it's confirming my suspicions that kids don't think I'm very cool anymore.
I was going to just say that this would depend on who you're sitting next to, because Kyle has some weird interests, and I don't know that I want his reinforcers. But
yeah, why is Kyle hoarding all these paper clips for? Yeah. Go ahead, Jessica.
I'm sorry. I think that's the crux of the next, like, all research should lead to more research, right? Like we have more questions now than we had. We did suspect the adult wouldn't work. Why did we suspect that? I don't remember. And it's interesting because most other research in our field on observational learning uses adults as the peer models or the peer confederates. But I think after the study where we did the peer versus nobody and only the peer was successful, we started to say, okay, there's something about that. The little person, the person that is about the same size and, that has a different effect than just anyone, particularly adults. And I think we tried to go into that a little bit in the discussion of the paper about why we think that happened. But I think it's important to say in our prior studies, and we have several of them, we have rotated the peers. We've used classmates who are familiar and, they've been together a while. We've brought in kids from other classrooms who are not familiar. I guess that's it. But it works no matter what. It works no matter who the kid is that's sitting in the other chair. But there has to be a kid in the other chair. So the adults.
It's interesting thinking about it from like a outside cultural perspective. I'm thinking like, elementary school versus, at least somewhat at 2 and 4, my kids tend to think I'm cool. Like, I know they won't very much longer, but they do compared to, Kyle's teenagers or preteens. But like middle school, there's nothing an adult does that's ever cool. And so I can see that a little more clearly. That the preschooler, I would have thought maybe they were a little bit more interested in with the adults, but everybody that's at least 10 years older is going to be lame to you at some point in your childhood. And so that kind of makes sense. I wonder if you have those children that, the rest of their little mini culture don't think are as cool or have weird interest, if they find something reinforcing, if that may have the opposite effect for some children as well. And then now we're getting into that verbal behavior too, but it would be interesting to see some of those effects as well.
Yeah, we actually at one point had we were talking about this morning. We had a middle school. We had a bunch of kids in middle school. So, you know, what age is 12, somewhere around there. And we thought about this. I think we started to collect some baseline data or some pre-intervention data, and it didn't. But what if we had them start wearing ties to school? Like, you know, these were kids. These were not tie wearing types of kids, and, you know, or some sort of, like, isn't that what fashion is? Isn't that how you explain fashion trends and stuff? But there's some other, there's more to it, right? When you're talking about that, you're talking about many to one. So it's we're only looking at the one participant. If there are many models, does that change?
Yeah.
So that's one question. I was going to say one other thing.
I think too, like we've talked a lot about it, like with the peer versus the adult. Yeah, at the younger age, like Hung and I now work in early intervention in preschool, like the adults are still cool. But there is something about like the peer competitiveness. And I think that that's what we're trying to systematically figure out and measure and observe, is that competitiveness with the peers. Because to use your block example from before, like if you went over and played with the blocks, like the blocks might not be as cool as if like their sibling went over and touched the blocks, right? So there is something about like the person who's the same age as you getting something that you're not getting. Like there is a competitive aspect to it, and I think that's what we're trying to like figure out in the next phases of the study. I don't know. That's what we've talked about a lot anyway.
Sure.
I mean, it's seeming like decades worth of potential places to take this with too, because if we look at it as a global perspective, and it's probably different from culture to culture as well, but, you know, we always talk about wanting to be in a utopian type of society, but I also want a Lamborghini my neighbor doesn't have. You know what I mean? Those reinforcers that you might be able to access that the other cannot, does make them more reinforcing naturally as well. And so this could have much farther reaching implications than just, you know, establishing reinforcers for children even too.
Yeah. I mean, originally, you know, I was around a lot of, I'll just call them psychologists, who were not necessarily educators, and they were trying to explain this from their perspective or their viewpoint. They, you know, the kids identified with their peers. They didn't identify with the adults. Okay, maybe. But there's more, you know, you said language earlier, like, yes, certainly we can verbally mediate many of the things in our lives. So this is a little bit not, you know, that complicates things. This is a little simpler than that. But one thing I also want to point out, so the data are, we see kids responding pretty quickly, right? When they're not getting the reinforcer, their data sort of tank, right? We see extinction, we see performance falls off completely because they're not doing it. But we've had those kids that will continue to perform no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's because they're under the contingencies of my teacher is giving me this task to do and I have to do it. Or not even my teacher. Some grown-up is giving me an instruction and I'm going to follow it no matter what, even if I don't want to. So you have to accept that there are some instructional histories that, you know, are going to affect things as well.
Yeah. I will say it reminds me of when I was in grad school, and for anybody that knows Tom Ratkos, Dr. Tom, we were doing some work with a teenager, I believe it was, who had some risky behavior. And so we'd done all this, you know, training, all these skill buildings, like we need to test it. So, you know, Tom put on jeans and a hoodie and pretended to be one of today's youth sitting there like, hey, you want to come join me do this thing? They just looked at him like, I'm like, was that really not was the training really effective, or are you just not passing for today's youth? You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, I think it's interesting. Like I think you guys should do this, but look at the video modeling research. There's a ton of it out there.
Yeah.
Those models are often adults.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, from what I know little, but like, I wonder if there's a difference if you had the peers do it. So I think that's a really valid research question.
Any other noteworthy findings in the results of this paper in particular?
Yeah, There are a couple directions, to be honest. So first of all, we have to acknowledge the limitation. We did follow the sequence, start from adult confederate, and then after adult confederate, there's no effect, and move on to peer confederate. So there's some sort of sequence effect. Maybe it was the whole duration of the intervention that changes their outcome. So there's some direction that we can go to that Jen will speak a little bit more about the future direction. But that's one way we need to kind of sort it out. And the other thing is, compared to a lot of research that using adults trying to implement this similar procedure, the adult actually make a lot of comments during the intervention. So they will say, I don't want that. That's dumb. Like, I want to play with this keyboard. That this is cool. And I like it. I love it. And then making all kinds of comments. And in our study, we didn't do that at all. Like either the adult or the peer conditions. Like they rule out any comments. So then there's no pairing occurred with other reinforcement history. And then you're not going to pair with this adult's comments with this, stimuli. So that's something that we did roll out. And we also want to encourage that other people who are listening, please try to, replicate this research as well, because it's very important for to show the effect of this procedure, like across other lab, or across other age group, for example. So that's something we do have in mind.
I'm sure that you use this procedure in your classrooms. What implications might these findings have for classrooms or like other learning environments? Say if I'm just a run-of-the-mill classroom teacher versus, maybe a preschool teacher, or how can I use these findings and these procedures in like a day-to-day classroom setting?
I think in the classroom, sometimes they really need to have some sort of quiet time, and preferably with books and something that's more educationally significant. It's really a procedure that can be easily implemented in the classroom, where if you sit at this table, you have access to all the books, but if you chose to be elsewhere, playing with toys, for example, or playing with your friends, you don't have access to that. And then we can have a couple confederate kind of sit with it, and then with the books, and then while other kids trying to approach it, and you did not access for them unless they're like at the specific area, for example. So really using that vicarious reinforcement piece, and then with the denial, that could be one thing I can immediately think of that would be useful for educator.
I think at maybe the core, the most important takeaway from this is that we were not using peers to teach new behaviors or to even teach any, model any kind of behavior. We were teaching new reinforcers.
Yeah.
So it's a very different animal. But peers are certainly, since the beginning of time, probably peers have been used to model. And look what he's doing. I'm gonna give everybody who's sitting, an extra sticker, and the whole vicarious reinforcement. But this is about, what are the reinforcers to begin with? What are the things that the kids are going to work for or behave for? And we know what are the common ways of conditioning new reinforcers. They're lengthy, they're cumbersome, they require an awful lot of individualized effort. And in a classroom setting where there's many kids and few teachers, that's not always feasible. So again, using the peers to kind of set the occasion, but to be able to condition a reinforcer in a very short period of time. We didn't answer your previous question, how long? These sessions are about 30 seconds.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay.
No time at all.
Yeah.
And in 30 seconds for 8 sessions, you've got a new reinforcer. Like, it's amazing. So
that's a powerful sell to the classroom teacher, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can definitely see how much easier it would be to not only teach, but to get someone on board. I remember early work in autism center during my master's program, and I was pairing auditory stimuli with reinforcers to then use them as a multi-step instruction, that every time we deliver a reinforcer after step 2 or 3, it would end the session. That was, you've gotten it now. We could never get that continuation. But having them see just a pairing procedure like that seems almost magical. It's like, this doesn't make sense compared to how easy it would be to have a kid 2 or 3 grades ahead of them come in and like reading a book and like making it seem so cool that now I've gotten access to this book, because kids tend to look up to kids a little bit older. Now you could establish that, learning material as a reinforcer within seconds, rather than having to do kind of a drawn out procedure. That quite powerful, it seems like.
I think what we've learned in all of the studies is the one thing that is consistent is that you have to have that denial condition. It's not enough to just present the opportunities and then have models come in and, you've got to withhold, and you've got to set up that contingency where that kid has to do something. And the kid doesn't always know what it is they have to do, right? Because we don't let them observe what the peer is doing. But they've got to want it badly enough. I mean, our exit criterion from the intervention has been, 2 consecutive mans, or it's been some kind of, we've had to cut it back. We don't want to go too far, but they have to demonstrate that they want it and that they're under some kind of a denial condition. And then when you go back and you deliver it under the, the task condition, and they work for it, you're done. It's amazing. It is amazing. I am always amazed by the results, and the data always look the same, which is really, really cool.
It's just, to me, there are so many students that hit that middle ground that kind of get missed or ignored through the education process. And I was very much one of those, that I didn't find the built-in reinforcers reinforcing enough, like compared to my wife, who was Miss Math and Science Center and wanted to have A's on everything. And being able to establish some of those reinforcers for the activities and the learning opportunities themselves would be so cool to do. And it seems like it's so much easier than everybody thinks it would be to do that.
Like I said, you just need to, you got to contrive a situation. I mean, the longest period of time I think the study takes is getting all the pre-intervention data, getting those AB conditions just to prove that this stimulus doesn't function as a reinforcer. But the conditioning itself it's minutes. It's minutes of time if you add it all together. So pretty cool.
I think we might be having some technical issues. I didn't boot
did Hung
Jennifer or Hung. Yeah.
Oh, and Jen is frozen? Oh, dear.
Yeah. No, it just happened maybe like a minute ago.
Yeah.
But no worries. We can start to wrap up anyways. Anything else? I know Hung kind of touched on future questions. Any other unanswered questions or future directions for research in this area? Or are you just going to keep the course, or what do you see?
I just, what I really, no one has ever replicated this procedure outside of our own lab. There have been a couple studies that they've done it, but they've done things differently. They've provided praise during the denial condition, or they've done something, and it doesn't exist if it's only in one place, right? That's what the quality indicators. It's got to be replicated across different labs or different places. So I hope there's people out there who want to take up this procedure and do it themselves completely individually, and see if you can get the same results, because it's very cool.
I do love these types of conversations. I'll say I had talked to Doug Greer about joining you all over there after I finished my master's, but I didn't want to have to go back and do the whole teaching certificate thing. And so I stayed at Western Michigan. But I mean, these types of conversations are enough for me to want to quit my job and go do some of this research, because I'm thinking even at the animal level, my aunt has 2 little puppies, and one has a toy, the other one runs over and grabs it. So this seems like it's very basic human behavior, and then it gets more and more complicated. What if we undid this pairing, and now people across the country aren't failing the marshmallow test because they can understand the greater good rather than my reinforcer or what my neighbor has that I should have too. I mean, the potential for that would be very cool to follow down and just expound on, but probably not in my lifetime.
But maybe as a very last word here, I think it's biological, and I don't think it's specific to humans. I mean, you see this in lions. You see this, right? Where I wanted this in the paper and they wouldn't let me put it in. Lions will continue to eat even after they're sated, even after
Mhm.
they're full, because they don't know when the next meal's coming, right? And they
Mhm.
only do that when there's all the other lions around. So that's a competition, and
Yeah.
that's survival.
Yeah.
I have to
Yeah.
get mine, or these people are gonna, or these others are gonna come and take it. And so I think it's really cool.
It is
It
cool.
is. Yeah, I didn't come into this expecting to have those more global questions now that I wish I
Yeah.
had answers to. So I appreciate those types of conversations a lot.
Me too.
Just gonna start making the yarn trail on the
Yeah.
newspaper clippings behind him pretty soon. Well, it's a bummer we lost
I know.
Jennifer and Hung, but it was a great conversation. Thank you, Jessica, for joining us, and extend my thanks to them if
I
you bump
certainly
into them
will.
in your building. Jessica
Yeah.
Singer-Dudek, Hung Chang, and Jennifer Longano. Thank you so much for joining Cooperant Learning and discussing this paper with us.
Thanks again for having us.